Okay, so it looks like we've got people starting to filter in. I don't know why. I've never been able to figure out why Zoom lets people in on like a rolling basis when there's a bunch of people waiting to get in, as opposed to just letting them all in at once. It's not like there's like a physical door that people have to get through, but if everyone or anyone could raise their hand, make sure they can, just so everyone hears us. Yes, okay, I don't even have to finish my thought and people start. Yeah, thank you. So we're just past the top of the hour and people are still being admitted here. So I don't know if we need to give it another minute or so and then get started. Or
Ryan's very good way of stalling until I could jump off the Zoom call to this one. So let's just be honest, Ryan. I'm like, stall. So here we go.
well, you always do the intro, so.
I know. Wait another, I think half a minute and we'll get started. So welcome everybody. I know Ryan us off here a bit, but we will be able to get started. Good. Looks like the big wave of people. We usually get another wave in about 5 more minutes, but we'll go ahead and get started then too. So I'm Brian Klontz with Charitable Solutions and have my partner Ryan Raffin and consultant who's been working with us a bit, Rebecca Dupre on as well. And so very glad to take you through the hopefully very timely topic of NFT donations and just sort of what non-fungible tokens are, and sort of going through the process, at least that we are sort of exploring and debating might be the right word, about sort of how this will actually work. So I do really appreciate your time and joining us. And many of you know before we get started, I usually do a little 8 to 10 minute overview of the other random stuff that we do. So to go through that, so again, Charitable Solutions is our firm. We'll be coming up, if we can make it another year, on our 20th year somehow, some way. And you can see that our mission is to help make charitable gifts happen that otherwise wouldn't. So when I started the firm in 2003, it was to only do that, primarily around non-cash assets and charitable gift annuities really from the outset. Maybe going top right to left, which I know is a little bit peculiar, but the emergency assistance fund work that we do, without going into that too deeply, I set up another nonprofit about 10 years ago called the Emergency Assistance Foundation. And so what we do there is we allow usually large employer groups to create employee hardship funds for disaster relief, personal hardships. You can see there we've got actually about 340 employer groups now, about 12 million employees globally. And we did 175,000 grants last year, so it's a kind of a crazy area, but we do a fair amount in that space. Again, it's all around risk management, helping make gifts happen. And so that's sort of one piece. The other piece are things like this in terms of CE and education for advisors primarily, but to board staff and donors. Usually do about 60 to 80 of those a year on the various topics that we discuss, like on these webinars. And we've got a speaking section on our website with maybe 30 or so topics that I or others in the firm will present on. So definitely enjoy doing that. A lot more virtual of late last couple of years than prior, but now it's actually interesting, sort of a mix, about maybe 50-50 at this point, which actually I hope will continue on a personal level a little bit. Charitable gift annuity risk management. So the reason why I really focused on non-cash assets and gift annuities is those are the only 2 types of donations that a charity can receive to actually lose more money than the original gift. So spend a fair amount of time in the risk management area. So we have a couple actuaries on staff. Actually did 2 of these projects today, so that's sort of coming up more and more with unfortunate market volatility. But doing stress testing on pools, primarily larger pools, and provide risk audits and reports there. One particular area that we focus within that, can be sort of separate and distinct or not, is around reinsurance, both placement and design. We've only done this since 1998, the only sort of insurance thing that we do, but work with carriers to design CGA reinsurance, usually on very large concentrated risks primarily, and did more of that last year, probably times 3 or 4 than we had ever done before. So there's a lot of just gigantic gift annuities coming in. The one last year we worked with a client, it was over $50 million for an S-Corp gift, and I think we did 7 reinsured gifts over $5 million per donation last year from a gift annuity. So they're just really big coming in, which creates other, obviously, risk. Charitable appraisals. So we've really built this out, and there's a real emphasis and focus for the firm this year. Got a team of 5, and the tagline that I'm saying over and over is, if they can give it to charity, we can appraise it. On NFTs, we did our first 4 qualified appraisals last week. And so we can do anything on the business side. I do all the crypto appraisals and life insurance. We have other people for art. We did one, which I think was funny. It was about a $200,000 bourbon collection at the end of last year. So anything that can be donated to the extent the charity needs for a CRT or for an outright gift, a qualified appraisal. We have a team. We only do charitable appraisals, so we're able to do that hopefully very cost effectively and efficiently. Non-cash assets, which obviously go to NFTs, this is really our primary space. We do this through the Decamai Foundation and the Decamai Asset Trust. We have a team of 20 now within the Charitable Solutions side. And so what we've always done is to be able to say, how can we manage risk through aggregation and structure such that a charity can extend their gift acceptance to gifts otherwise that they have the ability, or they do, I should say, don't have the ability or capacity or risk tolerance or time to take in. So rather than saying no, they're able then to make the donation or actually make the referral of the donor over to our foundation. We have no contracts with any charities. We're only working with the donor at that point. They create a donor-advised fund. We do all of our stuff. They get all the deductions. Obviously, we are a public charity. And then we're able to make a grant based on donor-advised fund best policies, of course, back to the charity or charities that the donor offered in the first place. So I'll get a little slide on the next one to sort of go through that. Before that, though, we also do this with gift annuities. Oh, I told you before, right? There we go. So National Gift Annuities, we do the same thing. So we have National Gift Annuity Foundation. We have over 560, actually over 600 contracts now in the gift annuity space, about 60 million or so, just under 60 million in total assets. So the point is we're registered in all 50 states. So charities that don't issue gift annuities, maybe they don't issue them for S-Corps or real estate, maybe they don't issue them in specific states, or it's a very large one that they don't want to take on. Instead, rather than saying no, they're able to refer that over to us. We are the ones that obviously manage the asset and the liability, have a very large pool, and then 100% of the residuum and then is passed back to them. So we're able, again, to capture these gifts otherwise it would have been captured through aggregation and risk management. So the next slide, I won't spend too much time, I want to get to the NFT side, is a number of people have asked, what has been your activity for last year around the non-cash space? So last year, biggest point here, maybe Ryan, you can put your little cursor up there, that 100% of these gifts. 100% of these gifts were declined by the referring charity. So we completed 260, it's actually 261 donations. It was just under 1.2 billion in total donations. So 1.2 billion that were captured that were otherwise declined. Of the 261 donations, it took us about roughly 1,900 referrals from all of the charities that we work with, about 300 or so charities we work with. Really, it's about 30 to 40 we do most of our work with. That then said, we're not able to take that in. Can you guys help with this? And we said, it's a good donor with a good asset wanting to do good things. We can hopefully help. 261 times we were able to help. And then you can see there the real estate breakdown by number and amount, business interests. You sort of see all that sort of deconstructed. One little quick point is on the LLC column where you see 88, a lot of LLCs are actually taxed as S-Corps. So our S-Corp size probably around that 35-ish, 30, 35-ish. So we do a lot of the S-Corp and UBIT space. And then you can see cryptocurrency, sort of a kissing cousin for what we're going to talk about today on the NFT side. It's about 37 gifts. And I say this over and over. We get so many, you have no idea how many calls we get about cryptocurrency. No idea. and it's good. We'll help as much as we can. We've done a number of webinars on that topic as well, all good. But that was 28 million. Sounds like a lot, but of roughly 1.2 billion, dinky. So we really encourage charities focus on real estate and privately held business interest gifts. Cryptocurrency, super shiny. Everybody gets super excited. I get it. 98% of what we did last year, real estate and privately held business interest. So just sort of as a little key point there. And then some other weird stuff that we've received as well. So with that, I'm so glad to be able to pass this over to Ryan Raffin, my partner last 7 years, leads our whole entire non-cash asset area. So as a partner there, and also is basically does all of our crypto processing. And he and Rebecca have spent a lot of time on sort of noodling through this NFT. So with that, I'll pass it over to you, Ryan.
Thanks, Brian. So a quick agenda here, what we're going to talk about for the next 45 minutes or so. First, a quick overview of NFTs, what they are, how they work, then a discussion of how they're taxed, what the charitable deduction might look like, followed by some discussion of different tax categories of owners and how that might impact the charitable contribution question. And then moving on to questions about valuations and required appraisals, and then practically, an important question for charities considering accepting NFTs, liquidation. And then we don't have it on here, but the last thing is just kind of the future of NFTs and where this space might be going, how it might evolve. So that's kind of the game plan for today. We do have that disclaimer at the bottom. Certainly would encourage anyone viewing this live or on the recording to check with their financial, tax, legal advisors to verify the information and to consider the specifics for their situation before making any decisions about NFTs or cryptocurrency or charitable giving generally. And certainly with a subject like NFTs, which as you'll see is a little more tenuous than most, we would certainly encourage people to consult with their advisors. So as it says there, these are free, please don't sue us. And with that said, let's talk about what NFTs actually are. So NFTs, it says they're non-fungible digital tokens, really just non-fungible tokens is the core of it. And what we're saying on the slide is that it's a token that represents text and image, really a digital file. Any kind of digital file can be turned into an NFT. What that means at its core is that these are digital assets like cryptocurrency, and like cryptocurrency, they're tied to the blockchain. The blockchain, just as a refresher, that means it's a public transaction record for all cryptocurrency and cryptocurrency related transactions, including NFTs. Basically, if there's some creation or transaction of NFTs or crypto like Bitcoin or Ethereum, that's recorded on the blockchain. It's public, it's verifiable, it cannot be tampered with in all but the most extreme circumstances, so it's very secure. And NFTs are part and parcel of that. So you'll hear a lot of references throughout this presentation to blockchain. And you'll also hear some references to smart contracts, which are really just implementations of blockchain technology where there's a kind of conditional formula built into the blockchain where if something happens, then the smart contract on the blockchain calls for something else to happen. NFTs, however, do have some key differences from cryptocurrency like Bitcoin. The core one is in that first word, non-fungible. One Bitcoin is the same as another. That's the way in which Bitcoin and its counterparts most resemble traditional fiat currency, where one US dollar is the same as another. That's not true at all of NFTs. Each NFT is completely unique. They all have a unique token associated with it, which is like a digital code. So the digital file, of course, underlying the NFT, that could be and often is a copy of some other digital file. But the token itself associated with that file is always unique. And that's how it can be identified and tracked on that blockchain. And we do have a comment there about copies versus originals. Really, that kind of gets to the core of this idea. The token's unique, but the file may be a copy. And that's not necessarily deceptive. That's just part of what NFTs are. So when we were writing up this slide deck, we thought, maybe that's a little bit abstract. Can we make it a little more concrete? Hopefully, sort of. I'm going to try. An NFT is just a digital file with a unique stamp of authenticity associated with it. That's the token, the digital stamp, if you will. You'll hear words like tokenization and minting used a lot. That just refers to the process of creating an NFT from an existing digital file. What that means is you'll see, and Rebecca included a screenshot from NBA Top Shot here. NBA Top Shot is a popular, basically sports collector cards for the digital age. They're video clips of NBA games for specific players, Steph Curry in the case of the one we have here. The digital clip itself exists elsewhere because, of course, broadcast rights for NBA games are very, very valuable. They're not going to give those up. But the NFT is created by taking that digital clip and tokenizing it. So now it has a token associated with it on the blockchain. That's the NFT part of it. And that token, of course, can be sold and transacted just like any other cryptocurrency on the blockchain. Another way to think about it is for high-end NFTs. Some of the people viewing this may have heard of the digital artist Beeple, who last year in 2021 did a very large NFT sale for one of his pieces, which sold for, I think, almost $70 million. So he had one of his pieces of digital artwork tokenized, so it became an NFT and then sold. So the buyer didn't buy the digital art itself, they bought the NFT. In that case, you can think of the NFT as serving as sort of the artist's signature on the piece. Anyone could copy the digital file, but only one person could buy the NFT, which the artist had tokenized, in effect serving as a digital signature. So that's sort of a background and an intro to what NFTs actually are and sort of how they work. So with that said, I'm going to pass it over to Rebecca, and she's going to talk a little bit more about the characterization for tax purposes and how that might look for gifting.
Great. Thanks so much, Ryan. Hopefully everyone can hear me. I have a little bit of a cold, but I'm going to do my best today. So we're going to try to get a little bit more into the meat of this, but as Ryan and Brian both said, we don't really know a lot yet. So a lot of this is based on research and sort of best educated guesses. Since we're all lawyers on this panel, I just wanted to maybe put that caveat out there again, just for my own sake. So as we start to evaluate NFTs from a charitable perspective, we need to first figure out what an NFT is from an asset perspective. So is it property? Is it currency? Is it something else? We really just don't know. But our best guess, especially using the IRS guidance, is that that it's probably property. So what we know from the IRS guidance is that when we look at the IRS guidance for cryptocurrency, we see there's like an FAQ on there, and then there's obviously been a lot more conversations around crypto. And because NFTs are closely tied to crypto, we want to kind of look at that first. And so the IRS treats crypto as property and not currency, despite the fact that, as Ryan kind of alluded to, certain tokens like Bitcoin and Ether are convertible into fiat currency, or stuff you can use to buy other stuff with. And so it's reasonable then, since NFTs are using the blockchain to trade and authenticate, and many NFTs can only be purchased by and sold for crypto, although that's also changing now, that the IRS is going to treat NFTs as property, not currency. Whether they'll eventually assign another classification that's more similar to collectibles or other types of artwork is really to be determined. And I think, my position is, and I think Ryan may agree, that's going to be largely governed, I think, by the smart contracts and sort of how they're set up for any particular NFT, because as he said, they're all unique. So it's not like crypto in that sense. You really have to look at each one in order to understand what it actually could be. Sorry to be so vague. So the next question then are NFTs tangible or intangible assets? And honestly, this is another one where we went back and forth on it a bit. And even some of the stuff we were reading by, people that are smarter than me seemed a little like they didn't know either. So I didn't feel so bad. So as of now, most NFTs are tied to intangibles, right? So Ryan mentioned the digital, the NBA Top Shots thing is a digital thing. So if you take the example at the bottom here of Jack Dorsey basically turning his first tweet into an NFT and then selling it and making a donation, those would be all seen as intangibles. So the IRS would likely treat them as intangibles. But as NFTs have evolved, even, and are still evolving, there are examples of them being tied to tangible assets. I read something on the Mintable website where you could buy a digital version of, I think it was a painting or some sort of artwork. And then when you bought it, you actually got a physical thing sent to you as well. So there's like two components to it. So really it's an area that's in flux. And if we just talk for a second about Jack Dorsey's gift, it was really, probably the most inefficient way to make a charitable donation. But the guy's, he probably doesn't need any more tax deduction. So maybe he didn't care. I don't know, Jack Dorsey. So I don't want to speak for him. But he sold the NFT at an auction and then basically converted the crypto, as far as I understand it, into fiat currency and then made the donation. So good for him. I mean, do what you got to do. But not necessarily, it's a little misleading to say that he, gave the NFT away as a charitable thing. So, but it's obviously encouraging that we have at least 4 people out there who are making the effort and are sort of, going to put their stamp in the ground. And maybe once we get some determination back on those kinds of gifts, we'll have a better sense of what the IRS is going to do. I think the final thing I just want to mention, again, it's more of a be aware of, not we know this, is there's a lot of talk out there about how royalties may eventually come into play with NFTs, particularly those that are seen as art or intellectual property. Again, I think the smart contract will be a big factor in determining this aspect of an NFT or what an NFT is. Because, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this as far as like the services versus property. So if we go to the next slide, we're just going to talk a little bit about the types of donors that are possible in this space. And again, we're sort of characterizing it probably more from an art world space, just because it kind of started out that way. But I'm not saying that these are the best ways, or maybe they'll be, hybrid into something else. But as of right now, this is, I think, the easiest way to start to understand it, because it matters sometimes who's holding it when the donation is made, right? So if we think about different people who might be considered creators or artists, so that's the person or entity who is making the NFT and then has it tokenized or minted on the blockchain. So we could characterize those folks as creators. And then we have dealers, and those are people who may hold an inventory for sale to consumers, kind of like what Ryan just talked about with the Top Shot people. If you go on their website, they have a wide range of things that you can buy on there for all kinds of different prices. So they would probably be considered more of a dealer because it's their business to sell these things. And then people who are collectors or traders, those folks, maybe it's not their usual course of business, but they have a particular interest in this and they've taken the time to understand it and kind of make this part of a collection. So again, it's similar to artwork or music or books, anything that you could potentially collect and hold. And then the personal user is really just like kind of your average person that just buys these things kind of as like one-offs. They could morph into a collector, I suppose, but they kind of start out just, buying the thing for their own use. The same way, again, you'd buy a piece of artwork and hang it up in your house, or buy some rare books and, put them in your library or something like that. So as we go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about what we think may be the charitable deductions available to these different groups of people. But again, it's all kind of based on what we know about artwork and gifts of tangible and intangible property. So when we think about creators or dealers, those are the people that are, again, either making the thing or in the business of selling the thing. The IRS generally treats these assets in hands of the creators and dealers as ordinary assets, meaning they get ordinary income and losses, as opposed to capital assets, which are governed by a different tax structure. So an NFT donated by a creator or a dealer is likely going to be limited to fair market value minus the appreciation, which is essentially basis. Similar to an artist donating a painting or something like that, the artist would be limited to their actual costs in the creation of the painting, so the canvas and the brushes and the paint. So a creator or dealer of an NFT would likely be limited to the actual cost in the creation of the NFT. And this would include the costs incurred for the tokenization or the minting of the NFT, which I imagine could be fairly expensive. I don't know, I've never done it. So, but it's, it may or may not be worthwhile from a charitable deduction standpoint for these folks to make these gifts. But we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a second too, because I think, again, I don't mean to be super vague or jumping back and forth on this, but it's really hard to say because this is so new and we haven't really seen it yet. We don't really know what the IRS is going to do. And they are so unique. It's really difficult to have a set in stone, yes, we know for sure kind of conversation, unfortunately. So as we move into collectors and personal users, although collectors may have other hurdles, which we'll talk about in a second, assets generally in the hands of these folks are treated as capital assets. So if you're, capital gains structure, the 0, 15, 20% structure, as opposed to ordinary income that's taxed, at the progressive tax rate. So if a person owns a capital asset for over a year, that asset is treated as long-term capital asset and it's generally taxed at a lower capital gains rate. So that's important, again, even in this context when we don't really know, that's a fundamental that we need to just point out. So the theory, I guess, that we've kind of come up with is that if a non-creator or non-dealer makes a direct contribution of a long-term capital asset, which I suppose could include an NFT, the donor would avoid the capital gains and receive a fair market value deduction, allegedly. So we will see if that's true or not. An issue that kind of came up again in this space, though, is when the NFT is seen as providing a service to the charity and not as property. So again, we talked about most NFTs are treated as property the same way that crypto is, and therefore could be eligible for the fair market value deduction when making a charitable donation. But there's a possibility that an NFT could be seen more as a service, particularly when it accompanies certain access as part of the ownership. So the example I'm thinking about is the Bored Apes, and kind of, even though you get the digital asset that's tokenized, it's a lot of being part of that group is about who you're part of the group with. So you own something that Jimmy Fallon owns, and I think Snoop Dogg, and all these other sort of famous people. So and then you kind of gain access to that crowd of people in a digital platform space. So is the thing more about the access, or is it more about the thing? So I don't know. It's confusing in a sense, and it's also kind of exciting to see how all of it's going to play out, and what it means for charity, obviously. So excuse me. So one other issue that I kind of alluded to before too is if NFTs are going to be seen as collectibles instead of as personal assets. So as most of you probably know, collectibles have a different treatment when it comes to how they're taxed. Even though most capital assets have a top tax rate of 20% for short-term holds, collectibles have a top tax rate of 28%, even if they're held longer than a year. And collectibles typically mean that a donor is stuck with basis, the way that they're characterized and treated as donations by the IRS. But let's make it even more complicated and say, what if that collectible is donated to a charity with a related use? So let's take, I don't know, any of this like digital artwork, right? And there's some museum out there that decides they're going to have an NFT exhibition, let's call it. And so donors donate their digital assets to the museum displays them. If the NFT is intangible, does the related use trump that treatment? I don't know. But it's an interesting idea. So as many of you probably know, you can overcome the basis deduction if the thing that you donate has a related use to the charity. So the easiest one is museums getting artwork, right? So the museum displays it, and the donor is able to take a fair market value deduction. And there's a lot of other rules around it I'm not going to go into right now, but just from a sort of top level conversation, we don't know if the IRS would then say, okay, even though it's intangible, not tangible, there's a related use, so there's a fair market value deduction. I think it's going to take a team of tax attorneys that some very wealthy person can hire to figure all of this out. So that's kind of the summary of what I think are the things that we need to be thinking about if, as charities, we're going to start accepting these types of assets, or we want to start talking to donors about them, or if we're presented with this as an option by our donors. This is more of, in my mind, of an issue spotting type conversation. And then hopefully, we'll get some more clarity soon enough. So I'll turn it back over to you, Ryan, for appraisals.
Great, thanks, Rebecca. With all that uncertainty that Rebecca just outlined so well, I guess I get the easier part because I can talk about what is certain, which is that an NFT that's donated to charity is still a non-cash contribution. Therefore, we're still in the standard world of non-cash contributions requiring a qualified appraisal and a Form 8283. All of that is still in play. And as we were preparing for this presentation, I was seeing some experts suggesting that the appraisal is actually the toughest part of doing a donation of an NFT, that an appraisal would be very difficult to get in most cases. Now, as Brian said, we do these. but there probably aren't many others who are out doing them. So it's going to be hard to find someone who can do it. And if they can, are they qualified? That's always an important part of the qualified appraisal piece. You cannot hire a real estate appraiser to appraise your NFT. And if some of these answers come in from the IRS where the deduction is looking pretty limited, is it really going to be worth the trouble to even get the appraisal? That's a good question. Like, is the carrot worth the stick in this case? And a lot of this really goes to the core difference between NFTs and cryptocurrency. It's that non-fungible element again. Standard cryptocurrency is very simple to appraise compared to NFTs because standard crypto trades on exchanges which function like public markets. Prices are known and readily established for any given day. The donor's date of donation, you can look at what the price was on that day and determine what the value was from there. It's very simple compared to an NFT where, as Rebecca is saying, these are more like collectibles or fine art in most cases, at least ones where the value is high enough to warrant charitable contribution. So how much is that going to cut against sort of the standard cryptocurrency appraisal approach, this unique aspect to each individual NFT? Definitely makes it more complicated. And as a practical matter, say your charity decides to accept NFTs, donor figures out the tax situation, or maybe just doesn't care. They transfer the NFT to your charity. What do you do then? I have it written here as, okay, now what? And that's an important question because the NFT itself is likely, not necessarily, but likely not bringing any particular value to your charity just sitting there. So how are they bought and sold? Thankfully, there are marketplaces specifically for NFTs. OpenSea and Rarible do seem to be the big ones right now. Those are specific to NFTs. However, the big crypto exchanges like Coinbase, Crypto.com are either launching marketplaces or have already done so. So there's something like one-stop shopping for your NFT and cryptocurrency needs coming or being rolled out as we speak. However, I will say there are still security concerns. This is very true with cryptocurrency, true with NFTs as well. It does not take much online research to find many, many stories about NFTs getting stolen or hacked. Just this past weekend, there was a phishing attack against OpenSea, and I think 2 or 3 dozen NFTs were lost. Total value 1.7 million just gone. So this is still a concern. If your charity gets the NFT, they're looking to liquidate it, you still have to be concerned about security because, like with cryptocurrency, once it's gone, it's gone. There's no way to get it back. So security is still a big concern. And liquidation, even on these marketplaces, assuming there's a good market for it on a place like OpenSea, it's still not as simple as selling even crypto because NFTs are typically exchanged back for cryptocurrency. So you don't sell NFTs for dollars or euros or pounds or whatever. You sell NFTs for typically Ethereum. And at that point, your charity has traded the NFT for Ethereum, which you then need to sell for actual dollars. So it becomes a two-step process. And I can tell you that if your charity is thinking about NFTs and you already think liquidating Bitcoin or Ethereum is going to be challenging, well, NFTs is going to include that part of the process, plus the whole NFT acceptance liquidation part. It's it's much more complicated in terms of liquidity. NFTs, again, it's the non-fungible nature of them. They just don't have the liquidity that traditional cryptocurrency does. And that goes to my final question: what if we can't find a buyer for our NFT? Then you might be stuck. You might be in trouble. It's going to be hard. Unless your donor is willing to buy it back, or they know someone who's willing to buy it back, and you're willing to engage in a transaction with a disqualified person, it might be tough. This is kind of one of the big risks with NFTs is, even if you can get the donation to your charity done, how can you sell it? How can you turn that into cash that your org can use? That's tricky. It's not a minor question. And so the last slide that we have here goes to future opportunities where we think the NFT space might develop. One obvious next step or space that it could expand into is ownership of physical property. And we're starting to see this a little bit already, tokenized ownership applying to non-digital assets. In some cases, you're seeing this for high-end collectible physical goods. I know Nike has explored this a little bit with some of their products, where there's an NFT associated with I think it was a shoe, and that's proof of ownership, proof of purchase, and maybe I think the idea is in the future that there could be some metaverse tie-in, which I don't fully understand. But the idea is certainly that the tokenization could be used to indicate ownership of physical property in whole or in part. And that's where we start to see DAOs come in. And if you thought non-fungible token was a mouthful, get ready for this one. DAO stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. What that is a group of people who've banded together, again, on the blockchain. There's no leadership or necessarily governing documents beyond what is written into the blockchain as the rules for how the DAO will operate. And the idea is that anyone can buy in. It's like crowdfunding or crowdsourcing applied to the cryptocurrency blockchain world. And this was really in the news a lot lately, because there was a DAO that was looking to buy an early rare copy of the US Constitution. And they had real money behind them. They raised $40 million to put in a bid on that copy of the Constitution. They were ultimately outbid by a billionaire, but I don't think they were outbid by much. They were close to actually getting it. And that's still ongoing. There's lots of efforts to buy other things. We had one recent example. I'm in Denver, so both of these next points are kind of local for me. There was a DAO that bought a large amount of acreage in Wyoming. I'll circle back to that in a moment. And then there's another one that's trying to buy the Denver Broncos. The Broncos are going to cost significantly more than 40 million. It's going to take probably 4 billion for that group to get the Broncos. But it's really a question of how many people can they get involved. And we've seen crowdfunding concepts obviously take off and be very successful over the last decade. So the DAO seems like a way to expand that, and potentially, because of its use of tokenization and blockchain, could in some ways be more reliable than crowdfunding. And so we have as a final question here, kind of what are the charitable opportunities? The one that I wanted to highlight was that the Wyoming case. Wyoming is a very crypto-friendly state, and their legislature has actually passed an act mapping kind of DAO structures and how they operate onto the existing Wyoming LLC Act. So if DAOs in Wyoming are functioning in a way that's similar to LLCs, well, then that becomes much more appealing for a charity. because an LLC donation is a lot easier. Charities do that all the time. Maybe not every charity, but a lot of them do. So that is an interesting opportunity, especially if we start to see more state legislatures incorporating DAO rules and sort of working them into an existing framework. The other one that I have heard about, and I should have included this on the slide, I have heard about some charities being approached by NFT groups where the NFTs are not donated, but the smart contract includes a provision for automatic payment to the charity on sale of the NFT. So the charity just gets paid anytime that NFT is sold. That's a very interesting implementation as well. So those were kind of my final comments on what the charitable opportunities might be in the future. I think we have a few questions here. Yeah, let's see.
Brian, as you're going through those, I've got maybe just a couple quick comments as well. So one thing I think that's very important, I think many of you maybe on the phone are thinking about issues as it relates to what these things are, how they can be used. So I'm going to make a statement that is crazy to even think about. So NFTs have not been around very long at all. And so the Financial Times came out with an article about 2 weeks ago that discussed the total amount of NFT transactions for 2021 were about $41 billion. These aren't created, these are actual sales. $41 billion, and that's just on the Ethereum blockchain. There are other blockchain, but Ethereum by far is the largest. The point in that is the total amount of all art on the globe, physical art, sold in 2021 was $50 billion. So this is not in any way immaterial in terms of the amount or size of these particular types of assets. And when I joke, if I'm on a plane and I want to talk to them, which I never do, when they ask me, what do I do for a living? I say, help wealthy people give weird things to charity. And so we just thought this would be most helpful, obviously, sort of cover a lot of ambiguous tax area to be sure, but $41 billion of these assets were transacted last year. So again, we just sort of put this in some context. It's not like, we heard about one of these 4 years ago, and isn't this interesting? This is a tidal wave of wealth and activity, and in particular around the future opportunities. The other question I had earlier today with a different charity reached out, and they said, well, what if the charity itself mints their own NFT? And then they go through the process of selling it. And that way the donor wouldn't have to be involved directly to get in all these tax issues. Like, well, that's interesting. But what does that mean relative to potentially unrelated business taxable income issues? That's a whole different ballgame. Is it their exempt purpose to mint and sell NFTs? I see another question, which is a great one. What happens if the charity has an NFT and they're actually giving that to the donor at certain gift levels? I have no clue how that would work. So now at a gift level, you've got a donor making a contribution. You actually have to have the contemporaneous written receipt saying, no goods or services were received. Well, now either a good and or service was received. At the NFT level, I call it the coffee cup rule, because basically if it's anything over whatever it is, like $12.83 or something crazy, anything over that is basically deemed material and has to be included as part of the goods and services received consideration. Well, now how are you doing that on an NFT? Are you getting those appraised? I have no idea how that would work. So there's just so much noise and actual activity and transactions around this that we're seeing. But to me, the most interesting thing is that what Ryan talked about was this ownership of physical property. What does this mean? Because right now they're doing it with major works of tangible art. They're doing it with real estate is coming quickly. So now you have all of a sudden an NFT wrapper on top of a traditional capital gain property. And now potentially you've got the NFT donor maybe owning, one token that represents 1/1000th of the Empire State Building. Now could that be then donated to a charity? What would the tax implication of that be? So it's just incredibly interesting to think about this. I wish we had clearer answers, but I'll sort of open that up for other questions. We got 10 minutes or so here for Ryan and for Rebecca and others, but it's just to me a very, very exciting area, even with all the murkiness. But if, as advisors on the phone and certainly development officers on the phone, this is not an insignificant asset class, even though it's so new.
Yeah, and I think as far as ownership of real estate goes, there's some questions kind of while you were speaking, Brian, or comments in the chat about the Wyoming example in particular. Who actually owns that? And Russ on our team pointed out that probably treated as tenants in common. My thinking is that in Wyoming in particular, with what they've done there, I think the idea is that they're treating the DAO as more like an LLC. So in that case, the DAO as an entity, to the extent that you could even call a concept like that an entity, the DAO itself owns the property, with each of the participants having their fractional ownership in the DAO. Now, I don't know if that will stick with other states, or they'll take different approaches, or if it would be more like tenants in common. I can see there's clear pros and cons to either approach, but I think it really remains to be seen exactly how legal ownership is going to weigh in when it is a large ownership group. It's not just one person buying one piece of art. That in that case, it's pretty simple. Let alone if it was something that cost $4 billion, like an NFL team. I think that would get pretty dicey. Oh, now Russ chatting. Where's the decision-making power lodged? I think that's all governed by the terms of the smart contract. I believe the voting is determined to the extent of your participation in most DAOs, except there are some where I think the founders get more votes, but my understanding is that to the extent of participation, it's allocated in the DAO smart contract itself, which does operate quite similar to most LLCs. Let's see a couple of the Q&As here. Yeah, question about having a buyer in the wings for the NFT. That is the best case scenario, I would say, by far. If there is a subject to normal assignment of income rules, those should not be any different. I don't see why they would be. Having a buyer in the wings is ideal. Let's see. And then, yeah, a question about nonprofits minting NFTs. That's, yeah, literally just came up this morning. And then if the nonprofit minted the NFT and then the donor bought it, yeah, and received, the charity receives the cash. Yeah, that's exactly, I think, what we had heard about this morning. And then a further question about the nonprofit getting royalties every time the NFT is sold again. Yeah, that can be written into the smart contract, and I have heard about that happening for some charities. That can be done and is being done, explored by some groups already. Let's see. Alan had a comment about the IRS not finding the sale of the NFT comparable within a reasonable time period. Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's, Alan, you have more experience with that kind of thing than I do. But I think that's, yeah, certainly would be a concern. And then a question about anonymous gifts of NFT and crypto, and does the charity need to know the donor? And this is something, Brian, you and I have discussed quite a bit, and it's a question that we've gotten quite a bit. Technically, no, you don't need to know the donor. It could be anonymous, and for a lot of people in the early adopters in the cryptocurrency space, privacy is paramount. That's why they like it. Yeah, as Russ just said, money laundering, yes, is a concern, and that's why so many of the exchanges have really ramped up the know your customer anti-money laundering regs under pressure from various governments across the world. But I guess what we've always fallen back on is that if it is an anonymous gift, it's still a gift, right? It goes to the charity, and then the charity is free to do with it what they will. So in that case, it would really be the same as any other anonymous gift, and because frankly, the giver could sell the Bitcoin before giving it, and then just give you the cash anonymously, and it would, you'd never know there as well. So that's kind of been our position regarding know your customer and anonymous crypto gifts. Brian, if I've misstated that or skipped over anything, let me know. But
no, that's exactly right. I mean, I think there are maybe three things. I'll get on like not a huge soapbox, but a mini one. First, the issue is that how would you do the 8282, which came up with in the chat? Yeah. That's exactly right. So the charity still, whether or not the donor actually claims the deduction or not, and you get an 8283, and that qualified appraisal still must do the 8282 if sold or otherwise disposed of within a 3-year period. So as part of that, you actually are supposed to put on there the Social Security number of the donor. So we do not deal with any donors, nor have we ever, that are anonymous because of just the know your customer rules and 8282 compliance piece. The second piece, this is a little bit of the soapbox, and I would be happy to debate it because I don't have the information anyway, but there is a perception that the crypto world and the NFT world are sort of extra nefarious. Probably true, to some extent. But it is interesting to me that there are some charities that are saying, look, if it's crypto coming in, we want to have a robust sort of know your customer, know your donor intake, 3-4 page due diligence. And then my sort of snarkiness is, what if you get a check? Are you doing that? Oh, no, why would we ever do that? Well, they could be selling drugs on the corner, and you have no idea. So, again, a little snarky. But I think the other sort of point is, from a money laundering standpoint, all things being equal, which they never are. I mean, the donors aren't getting anything back from that. And I'm not saying any charity should participate in money laundering, clearly, but you sort of get the point that, it's sort of the money laundering piece is usually, layering and all kind of other stuff that's going on, placement and so forth, where somehow the donor's like getting things back, or in this case, not even a donor, the client is getting sort of things back in some way. But it's still something very, very important to sort of understand about who you're working with. Is this a donor? Do you have a relationship? Are they free with information, and so on? So we'll sort of see how all that plays out. And then this is a great question. Is this an asset class here for the long haul? This is my completely personal view. I have to hop off for another call here in a second, but yes or no. I mean, to me, this is like hyper binary. In 5 years or maybe 10 years or 15, I have no idea. We're going to laugh. Like, oh my God, people paid that amount of money for a Bored Ape digital. It's insane. Or conversely, oh my gosh, I wish we could have bought those before, because now it's sort of the metaverse concept has sort of fully taken hold. Very much like crypto. I mean, I think, is the jury still out there? Certainly, more of a use, in many cases, proposition and value proposition than certainly it was 3 or 4 years ago, and certainly was more than 10 years ago. So I have no clue is the answer to that. We will see. But the point is, there are a lot of very charitably inclined donors, including the mentors themselves. And you keep hearing over and over, we're like the Jack Dorsey case that Rebecca mentioned. We're doing this, we're minting it, and then we're giving this to charity. Can there be a better way of doing that, even if there's not gain recognition? And if they are charitably inclined and they have assets that are increasing in value this much, where is that intersection around risk, around tax compliance, and charitable giving? And so that's very interesting to see sort of how this plays out. But I would just say, if you guys want to stay on a little bit more, thank you so much, Ryan and Rebecca. Fantastic job in a very, very murky area. That is for sure. But I hope, we try to present things that are very timely. We've been getting a lot of these questions. We've done these recent appraisals, and our whole reason for existence is helping gifts happen that otherwise wouldn't. And this is yet a new, very new asset that we dealt last year with SPACs and pipes and crypto, and now we're right into NFTs. So the market is moving very, very quickly, and your donors and your clients own these kinds of assets. So we try to help at least frame what's going on in terms of charitable giving opportunities in the space. So with that, it looks like we're about 101. So I will close out. Thank you guys again so much for your great work, and thanks everybody for attending, and enjoy your day.
Great, thanks all.